They were found dead, discarded like trash. Two women, states apart, connected by a horrifying signature. Hands severed, identities erased. Crimson hair is the only clue to their killer's perverted obsession. Despite the passage of decades, the secrets surrounding the Vernon County Jane Doe and the infamous Redhead murders continue to remain buried along the lonely highways, which were once the hunting grounds of an elusive predator. Countless questions haunt the victims' families and taunt investigators still consumed by the cases. Who were these women, and what monster targeted them for their auburn locks, then tossed them aside to rot? How many more victims remain undiscovered, denied justice and closure? Join us as we figure out these brutal enigmas, uncovering the secrets hidden along these deserted highways, and confronting the darkness within the human soul. May 4th, 1984 started as a typical spring day in the rolling hills of Vernon County, Wisconsin. The small town of Westby, known for its Norwegian heritage and picturesque countryside, had no idea that a gruesome discovery would shatter its peaceful facade. As the sun rose over the lush green landscape, three unsuspecting teenagers set out on a journey that would forever change their lives and the history of their tight-knit community. The three friends, out for a leisurely drive along the winding rural roads, suddenly noticed something strange in the ditch. As they cautiously approached, their curiosity turned to horror when they realized they had stumbled upon a human body. With trembling hands, they rushed to the nearest phone to alert the authorities. Little did they know, their shocking discovery would begin a mystery that would baffle investigators for decades. Upon arriving at the scene, sheriff's deputies were met with a chilling scene. The body, partially concealed by the tall grass, belonged to a woman who had met a violent end. Her face was severely battered, rendering her unrecognizable. Most disturbingly, both of her hands had been severed at the wrists and were nowhere to be found. The brutality of the crime was unlike anything the small community had ever witnessed. As word spread, fear and speculation gripped the town. Who was this mystery woman, and what monster could have committed such a heinous act? Hansen, the patrol deputy who answered the call nearly 30 years ago, still carries the weight of this case with him today. A relatively elderly lady dumped at a roadside, dying a violent death. It just doesn't seem right that she isn't identified and returned to where she belongs, said Hansen. Investigators quickly determined that the woman had not been killed at the location where her body was found. The lake of blood at the scene indicated that she had been murdered elsewhere and then dumped along the roadside. This realization only deepened the mystery surrounding her identity and fate. Whoever killed her went to extraordinary efforts to conceal her identity, said Vernon County Sheriff John Spears. We need to go to extraordinary efforts to break through that and identify her. The Vernon County Jane Doe was a white female, estimated to be between 50 and 65 years old at the time of her death. Her hair, which was graying and brown, appeared to have been recently permed, giving investigators a clue about her possible appearance before her untimely demise. Based on the examination of her remains, Jane Doe was believed to be around 5 foot 5 inches tall and weighed approximately 150 pounds. While helpful in creating a general profile, these details could not identify her without additional distinguishing features or DNA evidence. It was dumped like a bag of garbage, said Lieutenant Scott Bierkos of the Vernon County Sheriff's Department, emphasizing the callous nature of the crime and the disregard for the victim's humanity. One notable characteristic of the body was the presence of a small scar on her abdomen, possibly indicating a previous surgery. Additionally, she had a unique dental profile, with several missing teeth and a distinct pattern of fillings that investigators hoped could help identify her. When discovered, Jane Doe wore a black and white checkered coat, a red and white striped shirt, blue pants, and black shoes. While not particularly distinctive, These items were carefully documented and preserved in the hopes that someone might recognize them and provide information. Investigators also found a yellow metal ring on one of her fingers, which could have held sentimental value or provided a clue to her identity. Despite their efforts, no one came forward to claim the clothing or ring belonging to a missing loved one. During the autopsy, medical examiners made several discoveries that could potentially aid in identifying the body. She had a set of partial dentures, suggesting that she had received dental care at some point in her life. Furthermore, X-rays revealed that she had previously suffered fractures to her ribs and left ankle, which had since healed. These injuries, while not necessarily uncommon, could have been the result of accidents or violence in her past. Investigators hoped that by sharing these unique details, someone who knew their woman might recognize her and help solve the mystery of her identity. The most disturbing aspect of this case was the fact that her hands had been severed and were never found. Investigators theorized that the killer had removed her hands to prevent identification through fingerprints, suggesting a level of planning and knowledge of forensic techniques. As part of the initial investigation, detectives interviewed residents in the area where the body was found. One witness reported seeing a suspicious man driving a yellow 1982 Datsun on the road the night before the discovery. The witness described the man as being in his 30s, with dark hair and a beard. However, the vague description and lack of additional details made it difficult for investigators to identify the potential suspect or link him to the crime. The absence of the victim's hands proved to be a significant obstacle in identifying her. Without fingerprints, investigators had to rely on other methods to try to determine her identity. They searched missing person databases and compared her dental records with those of reported missing women, but no matches were found. The lack of identification made it challenging to retrace her steps and identify potential suspects. Investigators were left with a victim they couldn't name, and a crime they couldn't solve despite their best efforts. The case quickly went cold, leaving the small community with an unsettling sense of unease. For decades, investigators pursued the identity of the Vernon County Jane Doe, utilizing dental records and DNA databases. Despite extensive efforts, including over 4,000 leads, her identity remains elusive. To generate new leads, investigators turned to forensic artists to create facial reconstructions of the Vernon County Jane Doe. Using her skull and other physical characteristics, these artists crafted images of what she might have looked like in life. In our Jane Doe case, we know the hair color, we know the color of her eyes, and along with the precision measurements that the forensic artist is going to be doing, we feel very confident that the likeness is going to be a lifelike likeness, Bierko said. The reconstructions were shared with the public, and investigators hoped that someone might recognize her and come forward with information. Despite extensive circulation in newspapers, TV, and online platforms, no one stepped forward to identify the woman. The reconstructions remained a stark reminder of the mystery. In August 2015, Jane Doe's body was exhumed, and the University of North Texas is still testing DNA. With all of the DNA profiles that have been gathered since testing started in earnest over the past 20 years, it's hoped a possible match or partial match of Jane Doe's DNA or evidence from her body can provide more clues. Authorities, including the Wisconsin DOJ, were assisted by the DNA Doe Project, until an update on their website on June 28th indicated. This is no longer a DDP case and is being worked on by another provider of investigative genetic genealogy. We'd like to get her back to her relatives, Bierko said. We'd like to get a name on the headstone. We'd also like to hold the person responsible for this accountable. In the southeastern heartland of the United States, a menacing shadow lurked, leaving a trail of grisly homicides across Tennessee, Arkansas, Mississippi, Pennsylvania, Kentucky, and West Virginia. These crimes struck terror in the hearts of the already marginalized women of the 80s, serving as a bleak reminder of the overlooked violence against women, particularly in vulnerable situations, in a country that professed equal human rights. The story speaks of a series of unsolved homicides of red-headed females in the United States between October 1978 and 1992, attributed to an unidentified male serial killer. The murders occurred in states such as Tennessee, Arkansas, Kentucky, Mississippi, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia, and the victims, often unidentified for years, were typically women with reddish hair, found along major highways, suggesting they may have been hitchhiking or involved in prostitution. Authorities are uncertain about the total number of victims and perpetrators involved, with estimates ranging from 5 to 14 victims, as only a few victims were recognized by November 2018. The diabolical entity behind this homicide was named the Bible Belt Strangler, due to the location of the murders within the Bible Belt region. The first identified victim of the killer was 28-year-old Lisa Nichols, found dead on September 16, 1984, along Interstate 40 near West Memphis, Arkansas. Lisa was considered a resident of West Virginia, but the authorities were not able to identify and contact her family members, due to which her identification remained on hold until June 1985. She was identified by a couple from Florida, with whom she was staying temporarily. No solid conclusions or witnesses were found regarding her murder, and the case came to a dead end. On January 1st, 1985, the decomposing body of a young Caucasian woman was discovered near Jellicoe, Tennessee, along Interstate 75. The victim, with curly red hair and green eyes, was estimated to be between 17 and 25 years old, possibly up to 30, and was found clothed in a tan pullover, a shirt, and jeans, wrapped in a blanket with traces of semen on it. She had scars and burn marks on her body, and was strangulated to death. Neither the victim nor the convict was identified for decades, until 2018, when she was identified through her fingerprints as Tina Marie McKinney Farmer, who was last seen accompanied by a trucker heading to Kentucky. Tina was reported missing by her father in 1984, yet no real efforts were made to locate the girl. However, in 2019, the DNA evidence linked her murder to convicted kidnapper Jerry Leon Johns, who was also implicated in several attacks against women, including another red-headed Linda Shake, who survived and testified against him. But Jerry died in 2015, evading the grip of the Law and Order Department forever. On March 31st, 1985, the skeleton of a red-haired woman, clothed in a shirt, sweater, pants, and underwear, was found in Pleasant View, Cheatham County, Tennessee, near Interstate 24. She was estimated to be dead for 3 to 5 months, and the cause of her death remained unknown. Unlike other victims, she was estimated to be between 31 and 40 years old, 5 feet 2 inches tall. Like every other dead body, she remained unidentified for decades, until July 2023, when she was identified as 23-year-old Michelle Lavone Inman of Nashville, Tennessee, through forensic genetic genealogy by the Tennessee Bureau of Identification and Othram Inc. As these dead bodies were found, one thing was quite clear. The killer had struck months before their dead bodies were even noticed, and at a place that provided him with complete privacy to carry out his plans. Michelle's body was only the beginning of a skeleton hunt that lay restless, waiting for them and their stories to be found. On April 1st, 1985, another woman's decaying body was found in a refrigerator in Gray, Knox County, Kentucky, near Route 25. She was found suffocated and nude, except for 2 necklace pendants and pairs of socks. The victim had distinctive moles below her breast, on her right cheek and her ankle, a yellow stained incisor, and scars on her abdomen, indicating that she went through childbirth. Her eyes were light brown, and her red hair was nearly a foot long. And after her autopsy, she was determined to be between 24 and 35 years old, and approximately 4 feet 9 to 4 feet 11 inches tall. The deceased, like the rest, was identified 4 decades later, on October 1st, 2018, as S.P. Regina Black Pilgrim, through DNA matching with her daughter, who said that her mother disappeared when she was 6 weeks old, Despite the consecutive findings of skeletal remains and that of identical women, on identical pathways with identical scenarios, these murders were being taken lightly, as no extra efforts were made, even to make it look like the police were giving their best. And even if they had been, the killer was way ahead of them, as the next victims they found had been dead for days, weeks, or even months. On April 3, 1985, the partial skeletal remains of a young girl were found, about 200 yards off Big Wheel Gap Road, about 4 miles southwest of Jellicoe, Tennessee, and was estimated to be between 9 and 15 years old. 32 bones, including her skull, were recovered, allowing for facial reconstruction, along with plastic button jewelry, size 5 boots, and clothing fragments nearby. Recent analysis suggests that she was not local to the area where she was found dead, but likely belonged to Florida or Central Texas, and had later journeyed across the United States. The body was not identified till 4 decades later, on August 30th, 2022, when she was identified as a 15-year-old Tracy Sue Walker of Lafayette, Indiana, who was reported missing by her relatives in 1978. This pattern of murder and the modus operandi of the killer became evident with each discovered body, be it of Priscilla Ann Belvins, Karen K. Nippers, Wetzel County Jane Doe, Lori Pennell, Elizabeth Lamotte, Betty Lowe Wisely, Stacy Lynn Jahorsky, or Donna Sue Nelton, all of whom were red-headed women, all either estimated prostitutes or estranged from their families, and all hunted with extreme precision. Many victims of the Redhead murders remained unidentified, likely due to estrangement from their families and not being native to the states they were found. In 1985, after the Greene County victim Elizabeth Lott was discovered dead, the states of Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Arkansas, and Mississippi sought FBI assistance, but to no avail. 21 officials from these states met with the FBI on April 21, 1985, conducting a 6-hour summit to determine if these murders were even related or not. Yet the result remained inconclusive. There were many variations among the victims and crime scenes, with some found clothed and others not, and some having engaged in sexual activity before their deaths. Steve Watson, Deputy Director of the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, said, "While there are some similarities in the cases, there's also a great number of dissimilarities." Watson emphasized that the majority of the women were not even exactly redheads, but carried rather similar shades. The others were strawberry blonde, or dark-haired ladies. The similarity that Watson highlighted was the fact that the majority of the women were estranged from their families, most of whom did not even bother to care about them, making them an easy target. These people tend to have a lifestyle not sufficiently tied to others who would be willing to report their being missing. As we reach the end of our journey into these haunting mysteries, we can't help but feel the weight of the lives lost and the families left shattered. The Vernon County Jane Doe and the victims of the Redhead murders were more than just names on a case file or face on a missing persons poster. They were daughters, sisters, friends, real people with hopes and dreams, loved and missed by those who knew them. It's easy to get caught up in the sensational details of these cases, to focus on the twisted motives of the killers and the baffling clues left behind, but we must never forget the human toll of these tragedies. Each victim was a life cut short, a future was stolen, and a family forever changed. As a society, we failed these women. We looked the other way when they needed us most, when they were vulnerable and alone on the highways of America. We let their cases go cold, their names fade from memory, but it's never too late to seek justice, to give a voice to the voiceless and a name to the nameless. The road ahead may be long and difficult, but we owe it to these women to keep searching for answers. We owe it to their families to never give up hope and to keep fighting for the closure and the peace they so desperately deserve. So let us honor the memory of the Vernon County Jane Doe and the Redhead murder victims by recommitting ourselves to the pursuit of truth and justice. Let us work together as a community to build a world where no one has to live in fear and every life is valued and protected. The answers are out there waiting to be found. The voices of the lost call out to us, begging to be heard. We must listen, act, and bring light to the darkness and hope to the hopeless. Together, we can make a difference. Together, we can bring these women home.